Hi, Simon. Hi, Niklaus.
Hi, Bodo. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Here is Niklaus.
Good afternoon, Niklaus. It's the fourth day of our Wide Bandgap conference. So far, we had nice discussions and cross discussions. We recognize that Fridays are like in the US, you have the restaurant PG Fridays, and that's people like to get into the relax mode and everything runs slower. But nevertheless, we have the thematic of simulation, and wide bandgap devices are paving the way to more efficiency, and any electronic design can be done with an simulation. Niklaus, do you have your camera on?
Yes, thanks. Oh, right. So, okay, this is disabled by
I don't see you.
But yeah, I can start my video. So, hello,
Hi.
everybody.
Hi, Niklaus.
Yeah, I
And
thought it's
Simon?
on, but I think I have to enable it. So when I enter the room, okay.
Okay. So I'm just looking to my backstage, and we are ready for starting our cross discussion. You had recent a Plex conference, and it could be nice if you tell us a little bit what you can share with the industry on that conference.
I'm sorry. So you mean our conference?
Yes,
the Plex
yes,
conference. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
As we have no questions coming in,
Yep.
so it would be nice to start to talk about your conference and about the findings you had with customers and things at the conference.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I was already some time ago, but I can try to recap some of the findings. I mean, for us, this was a first time doing a conference. So first of all, it was for us interesting just to get, in contact with the users of our real-time simulation platform. That was the main goal of it. And I think that worked really well. People presented their approach on how to use real-time simulation, and that was interesting to see the different approaches for rapid control prototyping, for hardware in the loop. So there was various different inputs from industry, but also from academia that were showing, how to really utilize these real-time simulation platforms. So I think, regarding wide bandgap, I wouldn't say there was anything very specific, but obviously everybody, tries to push the limits and go to higher switching frequencies, whether that is, maybe gallium nitride devices, or maybe just, classical designs trying to increase switching frequency. So that is a very typical approach, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you, Niklaus. Simon, any general statements you would bring out to wide bandgap usage and contacts you have?
Yeah, basically, I want to mention, I mean, I've seen it, you always also place it in your news, that we had a press release that Altium is basically integrating parts of our simulation technology into their tooling to look at better and DCIR drop, power plane resonances, this kind of stuff. And so I think this is something which really is also for SIG and GAN designers, PCB designers, application designers important, because I would assume that Altium is somehow a little bit spread in that market, as the PCBs are, how to say, not that complex as, for instance, backplanes or something like that. So Altium has a larger market share there. And so this simulation technologies really enable designers here for early assessment of the PCB performance in terms of switching events, what kind of resonances you might expect, and that kind of stuff. So that's maybe something I want to emphasize here, that let's say the art of simulation, I would say, is spreading more and more out in the market.
I understand simulation is a good way to save resources and shortcut design processes. And when I was a young engineer, we just did worst case calculations if the devices were within the ratings, and then did just measurements to keep it going. So it's good to see that simulation nowadays is given as much more security and shortcut in our work.
Yeah, I mean, the paper I have shown basically in the contribution here to the conference also is a big progress with easy modeling, using a behavioral model for the switching devices, even if you don't have, how to say, a very accurate SIG or GAN model. I think not every company can afford, of course, a double pulse tester and the respective characterization. So they users usually would have to rely on the models they get, and sometimes they even do not have access to models as they like. And so this approach really gives every user the possibility to, just by adding the typical datasheet parameters, to match conducted EMI simulation results. And I mean, when you fail late in the process of development, you know, the cost is rising exponentially. As later you detect that you cannot meet the specification or so. And let's say here the virtual prototyping and the virtual conducted EMI measurement, how to say, really helps the engineers out in the field.
Yes, Simon, I remember that's back in the 90s, so we are looking back 30 years, when PSpice modeling was very popular, and the IGBTs had a great acceptance in the world, that people started to, especially the University of Aachen, did a modeling on PSpice, and also Dresden worked on that modeling. And the problem, what I remember from these days, is when the device in its basic is not stable enough, that from the data sheet there is a too high bandwidth of changing in the parameters. So that that was quite a problem doing piecewise models at that time. I do not know if you're aware of GAN or SiC devices. If you go by the data sheet, that if you push out to a certain border, it could be that they also show a variance to what the data sheet shows and what's the exact performance was in the data sheet.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. This is still a challenge. I would not claim that these issues are all gone away, but let's say a proper modeling, basically doing a SPICE model also usually contains corner cases. They are not necessarily built in the data sheet, but in the PSPICE model. And of course, let's say with respect to a decent characterization, you can have multiple models for the same device based on different corner cases. I mean, that would make it much more sure. What the simulation still offers you when you only have a data sheet is still that you can assume a 5 or 10% variance in respective parameters, yeah, and can look how this influences your design. But I totally agree that what I was showing here is, of course, limited to a rough pass-fail criteria if your design is going to work or not. If you then have a small violation later on by, I don't know, 5 dB in EMC test, I mean, what is 5 dB in measurement? Yeah, almost nothing. And so tracing that back to where it's coming from is then really hard work. I mean, here simulation can additionally help you in finding the respective parameters which cause the problem if you vary them. I doubt that if you are on leading edge products in the market that you have always access to the best models available, because I mean, these are early lifetime products, and the variance in the process itself became much better over the last years, but still mass production and the characterization over mass production gives you the best models. I cannot comment on how the semiconductor vendors really improve their models with respect to revisions they release over the lifetime and the characterization. This is a complete different story.
Okay, so
yeah, and I mean, if I can say something here, I think simulation in general, people do not expect to have an absolute value or absolute simulation result that matches exactly a certain measurement setup. What people want simulation for is, as was said before, is to basically limit or bring down the number of design iterations, and their relative comparison is an important factor. So even though you might not estimate your losses or EMI performance, to a certain absolute value, can still help you find the best choice for your design. Because in the end, well, the world isn't perfect, but you can make your design in the number of ways you can do it. You can make it as good as possible, and I think that's kind of the task of simulation, not really predicting everything to the last digit when it comes to measurements, which in the end also have certain error that you will do, measurement errors, and yeah, I think that's the main aspect of it.
okay, gentlemen. We have no questions from the auditorium, and we had a good cross discussion between ourselves, which gave good insight to the field. The recorded discussion will be available for later on for people to look up and see it. I'm not quite sure if you have no additional points where we should work back and forth on it. I would say, thank God it's Friday. So TG Friday. My first TG Friday bar and restaurant, I went into it in Chicago at the Sheraton Hotel, across a little bit outside, and that was quite a hype that time. You had to line up to get into that place, and in 2001 I came to Chicago again, and I had a Radisson hotel booked, and I came into the hotel, and the girl behind the front desk was looking at me, and I looked at her, and I asked her, has it been a Sheraton? And she looked at me and said, yes, sir. And by that, she said, before I was born. By that, I was knowing how old I am. And that's again, nearly more than 22 years ago. So let's look forward to more good design and simulation work. I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and maybe a happy hour. So far, I will say goodbye for today. Looking forward to see you at one of the upcoming events, APEC, PCIM, or what else.
Thank you very much, and
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks to you. Same to you, actually. Have a good weekend.
Goodbye.
Bye for now.
Have a
Bye.
nice holiday.